Hello everybody, my name is Squaggy, and this is Deck Inspection. Here in Deck Inspection, I'm going to give you an overview of the deck, then I'm going to give you a showcase match, and finally, we'll do some reflections on where I think the deck stands in the current metagame. Today, we're going to be inspecting Krysrain Cadenza. Krysrain was one of the original 6 faded ones, coming out in DZBT-01 and used by Saito Mikoto in the anime. The deck revolves around having differently named units on your board, with Krysrain gaining more buffs the more you have. It also uses its divine skill to return units to your hand and call another mid-battle, echoing the power and critical of your Vanguard. Despite continuous support for the past 10 sets, the deck has always been pretty middling, arguably the worst of the original 6. But thanks to set 11, Krysrain has gotten a new form in Krysrain Cadenza and some new support to give it a second chance in the metagame. So, let's inspect. This list is mostly taken from WGP Tokyo, landing 3rd place. To start, we're on the commonly called Mermaid Ride line. Senna, when ridden by Aqua, allows you to Soul Blast 1 and add any grade 2 or higher unit from the top 7, whilst Aqua does the same but limited to top 5, has no cost, and only when ridden over by a mermaid, which Krysrain is. Krysrain Cadenza can counterblast 1 and gain effects based on the number of differently named units you have. At the bare minimum, you will get 1 effect, but if you have 4 differently named units, you can get 2, and if you have 5, you activate all 5. The effects are to draw 1 card and energy charge 3, give a unit 15,000 power, have your Vanguard gain 1 critical, and to be able to bounce a unit at the end of the turn. Because of the way the deck is built, you're going to have access to all 5 pretty often, so you'll be netting a ton of advantage. Furthermore, her Divine Skill actually got a bit of a change. Again, for newer players, the Divine Skill is only usable once per game, so make it count. At the end of the battle that Krysrain attacks, if your opponent is grade 3, you can Soul Blast 1, and in exchange, you can bounce any number of units you want, then call another one that matches Krysrain's power and critical. Meaning with Krysrain's support, you can now have 5 attacks on the Divine Skill turn, all of which are going to hit for really big numbers. For a little bit of extra power, Krysrain's Divine Skill now counts the power from the boost, assuming you don't bounce the booster back, according to the Japanese Vanguard database, of course. So, keep it in mind when you bounce. In the main deck, we're on 3 Persona Rite, of course, and then we are on 2 Prisia. The energy used in this deck sometimes is outpaced by how fast you can charge it, so this lets us keep the excess energy in check and gives us some extra cards we want to discard as we ride up. It's also really useful to guard with her and just gives you a way to sink your energy and just convert it to a draw. The effect she has on board isn't bad either, but we barely use that. Next up, we have 4 Francette, who has a secret effect that you may have never seen since it's locked to Krysrain. When Francette attacks, she gains 5,000 power till the end of the turn if you have 3 differently named units. And with 4, at the end of the battle, she can bounce another unit. Furthermore, if she gains power by Krysrain's effect, she can give Krysrain 10,000 power. This makes her the ideal attacker on Krysrain. For older players who may have older copies of Francette got an errata that specifies it is the power gaining skill that lets you give Krysrain 10,000 power, so your older copies may not reflect that. Just keep it in mind so you don't give it the bounce effect and expect it to give Krysrain 10,000 power. We're also on 1 Tormana. When your Vanguard is Krysrain for Soul Blast 2, you can call any grade 1 from your deck. This gives you immediate access to power players like Ricius and Rochelle, but also provides access to the Jeweled Beast to bounce back to the hand for later guard. She's also one of the best ways to create a boosted attack from the Divine Skill call, making her an ideal target for that too. And with all that utility, she's also a 15k attacker anyways, so she's amazing all around. We're on 1 because Soul Blast 2 is kind of heavy in Krysrain, but you will get to use her when you need her. Next, we're on 3 Armel, Krysrain's new triple rare rearguard. When placed, you Soul Charge 1. If your Vanguard is Krysrain, 1 unit on your field then gains 5,000 power if you Soul Charged. Then, if you Counterblast 1 when your Vanguard is Krysrain on place, you'll draw 1 and she's gonna gain 5,000 power on her own. If that wasn't enough, her Axe skill lets her Energy Blast 3 if you've played an Order this turn and call a grade 1 non-sentinel from your drop to the board with a different name from something that's already there. This means we're going to be on a really high order count to proc this often. This card is really good. It is worth altering the deck for multiple orders just so that we can use her over and over again. It gives you a way to use your energy, it lets you recycle pieces like Rochelle, it lets you bring back early used Jeweled Beasts, and it gives you a really solid counterblast sink in a deck that takes a fair amount of damage early. To proc that as often as possible, our order of choice is High 5. High 5 lets you draw 1 card for counterblast 1 and then call a unit, which is costless if you're a Divine Skill Vanguard, which Krysrain is. Then, if your Vanguard is grade 3, the unit called gains 5,000 power, and when it leaves the board, another unit gains 5,000 power. This is one of the most powerful orders in the game, and combined with Armel, it is crazy efficient and lets you build powerful boards from very little starting. On to the grade 1s, we're on 4 Rochelle. When Krysrain attacks, you can move her to the soul for Energy Blast 3, then draw a card and stand the unit that was chosen by Krysrain's skill, making 4 attacks or 5 on the Divine turn. While this is a very powerful effect, keep in mind in the showcase games that I do show later, I forget to draw 1 of this Energy Blast 3, which is a mandatory effect, so make sure you don't forget it like I do. It doesn't really turn the tide one way or another in the games, but just keep it in mind. We're also on 3 Eureka, which is mostly used for early game. It lets you push for early damage whilst moving pieces off your front row, so you can minimize the chance of being damage denied, which is a common practice versus a deck like Krysrain that needs a counterblast to go off. Following that, we have 2 Arisias, who gives 10,000 power to any other unit on board or on place, making her great on the Divine skill turn since during your main phase you can give Krysrain more power for her Divine skill to copy. Furthermore, she's really useful early if you can bounce her, with 2 more likely to see her, but you don't really want her on board without a way to bounce her back. The Jewel Beast, as mentioned earlier, can be found really easy with Tormana. It can be used early to chump block 5 to guard attacks and then recycled with Armel. We're also on 1 Beltine. Beltine is seemingly pack filler, but it's one of the easiest ways to get an 18k booster, which only requires you to place 4 units, which is really easy in this deck. Remember, Cadenza's Divine skill also now keeps the boost of a unit. You can see this on the JP database, so long as you keep the booster on board, which makes this Divine skill unit massive after you call it. Just keep her on the board. Finally, we are on 4 Perfect Guard units. The reason for 4 units over Elementaria is that the deck does need units on board sometimes in a pinch, so you may need to call them, which of course you can't call Elementaria. Fire Regalis also gets to call a unit, which could be a Perfect Guard, which lets you bounce them back to your hand if you need them. And of course we're also on 1 of the Ace unit. Following that, we're on 8 Crit, all of different names just in case, 3 fronts and 4 heals, also all different names except for the restand heals. The overtrigger of choice for me is the Cray Elemental OT that comes in the trial decks and is sometimes promo cards. The reason for this is that when you give the unit that's restood with Rochelle and Krysrain herself, plus the unit that you just called 100 million, you get what I feel is the most lethal pressure possible. Red Overtrigger's restand can target the unit guaranteed with the 2 critical, and then you're swinging with a restanding big attack that is, you can still hard guard it. I think both are fine, I just think it's fun to use the Cray OT. Blue OT is great too, so it's mostly personal preference. Okay, the ever-changing is here, so let's see what the deck can do. I'm going to show you 2 games against Leonord. Leonord is going to be a really popular deck this format, so it's good to see how this deck will fare against that. We're going first, and we're going to discard Fire Regalis and ride up into Sedna and pass. My opponent will discard Sinceret and draw 2 cards using Energy Blast 3 to pay the cost for Sinceret. Gracia makes a plant token, and Rosarium calls another. They're going to swing with their Vanguard, we're just going to take this one, we're going to check Rancet, they're going to swing with their plant token and check Eureka. On our turn, we're going to discard High 5 and ride into Aqua and proc Setna's skill, and from the top 7, we are going to get nothing. It's unfortunate, but that is the Mermaid Right Line's risk. We're going to call Armel, Soul Charge 1, call Rancet, and then call Beltine. They're going to take Armel's attack and check a front trigger, and we're going to swing with our Vanguard. They're not going to guard it. We're going to get a heal trigger and heal out 1 and deal 1 point of damage, and then Rancet will swing for 23k, forcing them to guard with a trigger and putting Armel back to our hand. A good tempo swing, but their offense is only just starting. They're going to discard another Sinceret and ride into Rectina, paying EB3 to draw 1. Then they're going to call Lagras, and with Lagras' skill, they're going to check the top 7 with and draw 1 card. They're going to do it again because they have 2 open CB, now checking the top 7 cards of their deck and finding nothing. Still, the board is quite fierce. With 15 from the center, we can't guard that. We're going to check a heal trigger thankfully and put our Vanguard to 20, forcing Rosarium to hit our friend's set, while the Lagras column thinks at our center that is guarded by a heal. Whew. On our turn, we're going to discard our critical trigger and ride into Cadenza. With Aqua skill, we're going to check the top 5 and add Precia to our hand, thankfully. From our drop, we'll bind the High 5 to draw a card and then call Armel from our hand. Armel's going to gain 5,000 power off this High 5, and we're going to Soul Charge 1 as well, giving Krysrain 5,000 in the process. We're going to Counterblast 1 and use Armel to draw 1 as well. Then we're going to call out Eureka and Resias, giving 10,000 power to Krysrain in the process. Finally, we're going to use Krysrain's skill to Counterblast 1 and proc all 5 effects. I give the bounce to Resias and 15,000 power to Armel, which gets reflected a bit later. We also gain ourselves a crit, and then we call the Ace unit from our hand, Energy Blasting 3 now and targeting Eureka with its skill so that it bounces at the end of the turn as we draw 1 card. We've missed Rochelle, so we're stuck at 3 attacks, but that's not a problem at all. 31,000 goes into their Vanguard and forces out the over trigger to guard here. We're going to check a front, followed by a critical trigger here, and put everything onto Armel, who's now going to be at 63,000 double critical going into their Vanguard here. We're going to push it in, trying to put them at 4 damage so that when we get to our Divine turn, they're going to be stuck guarding 2 massive attacks. Because Armel has left the board, our Ace unit will gain 5,000 more power thanks to High 5's effect, forcing out the Lagras to intercept as well. In the end phase, both Resias and Eureka will bounce to our hand as they ride into Traumond. They're going to shift their Rosarium Fairy to the front row and put the plant token in the back row, and then they're going to call a Moimor, drawing a card using their skill and then proccing Sincera and targeting their Lagras, setting it to a 15,000 base, making it a 20k booster. In battle phase, Moimor is going to swing for 50,000 power boosted by Lagras, and we have no choice but to take this, checking a perfect guard in the process. No such luck on the defensives. Leonor will swing for 43,000 with triple drive, and we are going to guard there with a perfect guard. They're going to check 3 blanks, but we're not done yet, because they're going to restand their Vanguard and Moimor and swing with their Vanguard, putting Vivace to their soul to get a drive check. We're going to guard for no pass and EB3 to draw 1. They're going to play heal trigger there, and give the power to Lagras. As such, Rosarium Fairy will now be swinging for 38,000, which we can thankfully still guard with 2 triggers, but Moimor is going to swing for 50, and that's a little harder to guard. And we're going to just take that, checking a heal, and putting us back to 3. Now it's our Persona Ride turn, and we're going to have to kill them here before they kill us on the Trauma Persona Ride clapback. We'll use High 5 to draw 1 and call Armel, soul charging 1, giving 5,000 power to Krysrain and 5,000 power to herself by counterblasting 1 to draw another card, finding us a mint. But if you recall, we soul blasted 1 earlier on, so by energy blasting 3, we can call 1 from our drop zone thanks to Armel's Act skill. Finally, we're going to call Resius and give 10,000 power to our Vanguard, and then use Krysrain's skill to draw 1 card, energy charge 3, give 15,000 power to something, and then make something bounce at the end of the turn. We'll give 15,000 power to Armel, because let's face it, we probably don't need to give more power to Krysrain. If they have a perfect guard, it's just going to get blocked anyways. The bounce will go to Armel, who will be staying on board after our Divine skill. The ace unit is going to swing for 30,000 power at Leonor, which will force out a 20,000 point guard. Now, Armel is going to swing for 48,000, and they're not going to guard this attack, not checking a trigger either, so they're going to be in a real bad spot once Krysrain hits. As Krysrain swings, Mint moves to the soul to make Armel stand, and they perfect guard it, which we are going to check a crit, giving the power to Krysrain and the critical to Armel. Afterwards, we check a blank, but nevertheless, we are still going to use Krysrain's Divine skill, soul blasting 1 and bouncing just the ace unit to our hand to call a Resius, who is going to give 10,000 power to Armel and have her own power be set to 51,000 and have a critical of 2, making every swing from this position lethal. Beltine herself is going to gain 10,000 power off her own skill, therefore we're going to have a 69,000 power Resius with double critical hitting Leonor and Trauma here, and they're not going to check a heal, so that's going to be the game. So the deck is great going first, but what about going second? Well, once more, we're up against Leonor, a deck that can really take advantage of going first, so we're going to see just how we fare. My opponent will discard Moimor for Ride and ride into Gracia. With Gracia's skill, they're going to call it Plant Token and pass. For our turn, we're going to discard Prisia for Ride, Energy Blast 3, draw 1, and draw 1 going second. We'll call Eureka and Rochelle, swing with our Vanguard for 8 and drive check into Krysrain, and they'll check a front. This won't hit, but we'll still swing with Mint so that we can use Eureka's skill to bounce her back. Passing to our opponent, they're going to discard for Ride into Rectina, and then call Parcia. With Parcia's skill, they're going to Soul Blast 1, reveal to us Vivace, and then they're going to call back Moimor from the drop zone. They'll then reveal Vivace again so that they can draw 1 off Moimor's skill. Then Soul Blasting 1 to call a Plant Token and move Parcia up. The swing of their Vanguard, we won't guard it, they'll check Trauma and we'll check a front, ending their turn. On our turn, we're going to discard High 5 and ride into Aqua. With Sadness skill, we'll Soul Blast 1 and check the top 7 cards of our deck, and this time we will find a Prisia, lucky for us. This will be great for us next turn to discard for Ride, but for now we are going to call Armel, and with Armel's skill, we're going to Soul Charge 1. This gives us the soul to use Eureka's skill. We'll move to battle and swing with our Vanguard. They're not going to guard it, and we're going to drive check into another High 5. They're going to check a critical trigger, giving the power to their Vanguard. So Armel will swing at their side, and we'll Soul Blast 1 to bounce her back to our hand. So we'll have the pass to turn to them. They're going to discard for Riot and go into Leonor and Traumand. Then they will call Lagras, and with Lagras' skill, they'll add Vivace from the top 7 to their hand and call Leonor and Vivace to the back row. Remember, with Traumand's skill, Leonor's can boost. Here, they're just going to swing with Traumand. With Traumand's skill, they're going to have Triple Drive. With Triple Drive, they're going to check Cicera, a critical trigger, giving the power to Lagras and the critical to Traumand, and they're going to check another critical, giving the power to the other side, and giving us 3 points of damage in the process. We're lucky to pull a heal trigger, making the next 2 attacks guardable, but we are still in a very tight spot. With 1 critical trigger and another, we're going to be able to get to our next turn with only 4 points of damage. Now we can at least clap back. We'll discard High 5 and ride into Cadenza. With Aqua skill, we'll check the top 5 cards of our deck and add Armel to our hand. From here, we're going to bind High 5 in our drop zone and draw 1 card, drawing into the Tormana, and then we are going to call an Armel from our hand. High 5 is going to give her 5,000 power, and then we are going to Soul Charge 1, giving 5,000 power to Krysrain, and then 5,000 to herself using Counterblast 1 as well. With the extra soul we now have, we can call Tormana and Soul Blast 2, so that we can from our deck call a Mint, getting 5,000 power from Tormana's own skill. Then, with Armel's Act, we're going to Energy Blast 3 and call back the Resius we just Soul Blasted to give 10,000 power to our Vanguard. Not too shabby. Then we're going to proc all of Krysrain's effects, letting Resius bounce and giving 15,000 power to Tormana. Going to the battle phase, Tormana's going to swing for 43,000 at Leonor. They are not going to guard this, and they're going to check a heal trigger. It doesn't heal, but she does gain the power. Now, Krysrain is going to swing for 31,000, telegraphing that we are not going to use the Divine skill, and Mint is going to stand the Tormana. They're going to guard with 2 triggers, making it to the pass, and we are going to check 1 heal. We'll give the power to Armel and heal out 1 Mint. Now, we're going to swing with Armel first, so that we can bounce her back to our hand and give 5,000 power to Tormana to make her hit a nicer number. They are going to guard, and Eureka is going to bounce our Mel back to our hand, and 5,000 power will be given to Tormana thanks to High Five, which forces our opponent to use a trigger rather than just intercepting with Lagras. We're going to pass. We are still in heal range, which is nice, but we have no perfect guards to speak of. So once Parcia moves to the Soul, and they swap around their Lagras and their plant token, they're going to call a Parcia, calling back a Moimor, and we're going to be in for a world of hurt. Following all of that, they're going to use Sincera's skill in the drop zone and set Lagras up to 20,000 base because they have Persona Ridden this turn, and then he's going to gain 5,000 more power, which is going to make him a huge boost to the Moimor in front. They only have one of the Rosarium Fairy / Moimors, so maybe we can make this work. They'll start with their Vivace column first for 31,000, and we're going to guard with a trigger and Precia drawing one, and that's a great draw for this turn. But it won't save us from 70,000 power from Moimor, which we will take, and we have no choice but to take this Leonor coming up. They check a non-effective heal, which they give the power to Leonor followed by 2 blanks, so we are alive for now, but they still have 2 more attacks coming. With Vivace to the Soul, Trauma now has 1 drive, 43,000 power. With the restand heal, we can put ourselves to 38. Then we're gonna guard for 1 to pass, which they thankfully will not break. And then after that, Moimor is going to swing for 55,000, which with every card in our hand, sans 1 Armel, we're actually going to be able to guard it. So you're just gonna see me fiddle around to try and make the guard, but we put so many cards onto the guard circle that Vangpro cannot take any more. That's how much we had to guard with. It is very lucky that we made it through. The Rochelle on rear is part of this guard, but Vangpro doesn't have the space for her, so we're just going to put her there, and then we're going to send everything to the drop zone, and thankfully, we've made it to our next Persona Ride turn, and hopefully we can clear the game here. We're going to Persona Ride, and that is a great draw. We're going to bind a High Five in the drop zone now to draw 1 more card, and then call Friend Set to rear guard circle. Then we're going to call our Mel and use all of her skills, so that we can have 5,000 power to Krysrain, herself, and we're going to draw 1 card of Counterblast 1 as well. Then, with Energy Blast 3, we're going to call Rochelle so that we can have our 5th attack of the turn. We're going to draw with Krysrain's skill into an ace unit, which is very useful here. And then we're going to give 15,000 power to Friend Set, which gives 10,000 power to Krysrain herself, plus Krysrain's going to get the extra crit from her own skill. In battle, our Mel swings for 38, which they are going to take. And then after they're not going to check a trigger, so we're going to swing with Friend Set for 48, which they're also going to take. Now we will swing with Krysrain and use mid skill to restand Friend Set, and then afterwards we're going to Divine Skill. But first, they're going to Perfect Guard this attack, as we know they checked a Perfect Guard in their drive checks earlier. Our drive check has Resias and a crit, and we'll give the crit to Friend Set and the power to Krysrain. We're going to bounce every unit to our hand, and then we're going to call Resias. She's going to give Friend Set another 10,000 power, so our power is very spread across the game. We're going to swing for 52 with Resias. They're going to check a heal trigger, but it's not enough because we have 2 points of damage coming in, and that's going to be the game here. As you can see, they don't even have enough to guard the next Friend Set. Okay? You've seen the deck in action. Let's inspect. I've chosen games against an aggressive strategy, which is also good in the current metagame, showing both first and second games. So, what's the good and what's the bad? First, the good. Cadenza has one of the most potent turn 3 offenses in the entire game. Sometimes your opponent just doesn't see perfect guards. Since none of Krysrain's skills are locked to your opponent being grade 3, you can have a really potent offense off the bat. I didn't even get to pull off Friend Set and Rochelle lines, and those turns were still really powerful. 2. The deck can draw a lot. High Five and Krysrain both dig. Being able to bounce units called from your drop adds hand cards, and Mint, which I keep forgetting to draw off, can also fill your hand pretty quickly when you play it. Finally, the Divine Skill turn is incredible. If you check even 1 crit, you are putting your opponent to 3 2-crit attacks minimum. Combined with the early rush of Eureka and your ace unit, your opponent should be at pretty high damage counts early, making turn 4 lethals very often. And specific to this metagame, a deck that can keep using the Soul and bounce away their board is great into another meta-dominant threat, Prison. Okay, now the bad. The hand is really contingent on drawing your perfect guards to make it through tough turns without some luck. No cards in this build gain shield, and even in the more teched shield builds, there is no consistent way to keep up your shield in a way something like Bowser's shield or Block Horse would. The deck also plans to take a lot of damage early, which can put you in really rough spots late in the game. While you don't really need more offensive drives for the sake of getting more criticals, what you do need it for is to check more heal triggers and get out of lethal ranges and swing tempo in your favor. Not only does Leonon rush, but decks like Prison can do it, Virgilla can do it, Toys can do it. So you're gonna be put to high damage real quick, real fast. So you have to be worried about it and get used to it. And if you don't get the Divine Skill turn finish, the deck doesn't have a great grind game. If your opponent sees ample perfect guards or is playing a deck with good shield tools, it's quite the uphill battle. In these games, we're up against Leonor, who plays on a very similar axis to us. But if we were playing against something like Toys with their 20k shield spawned off EB3 and the defensive checks they often get, it's gonna be a little tougher. Still, the deck is actually quite good. The weaknesses of the old Krysrain of weak guard hands and poor grind stay in smaller ways thanks to more bounces and digging, but her strengths have been upped a ton. The deck is gaining a lot of popularity thanks to this recent top finish alongside Friendset's reprint, so expect to see a lot more of this Little Mermaid in your future. It's a fast, aggressive strategy that makes every swing feel like the end of the world for your opponent. If you want a bit more, in the description I've linked not only the Tokyo WGP where you can watch the player play 2 games versus Prison as well, I've also linked their note article which has the thought processes of the player laid out, though you'll have to Google translate it or know Japanese to understand it. Alright, that's all from me. I'll see you all in my next YouTube short where I teach you all how to draw one of mandatory effects. Bye bye!